Today we'll be reviewing for your upcoming quiz on lessons 2.1 through 2.5. This is for geometry students. The first thing we'll think about is we're going to write a conjecture given that figure A, B, C, D has 5 congruent sides and 5 congruent angles. If we think about the number 5 here, that's going to tell us what shape this is. Then we need to figure out what type of shape this is. So 5 sides means that it's a pentagon, and the fact that all of the sides are congruent and all of the angles are congruent would mean that it's also considered a regular pentagon. So our conjecture would be that figure A, B, C, D, E is a regular pentagon. Here we're asked to find a counterexample. It gives us a scenario if angle A and angle B are supplementary, the measure of angle A equals 90. Well, a counterexample is necessarily if they are supplementary, yes, the angles need to add up to 180, but each angle does not have to be the same. So, if angle A equals 90, angle B would also equal 90, but that is not our only scenario. So if we think about 2 other angles that add up to be 180, that could be our counterexample. So I considered angle A to be 85, let's say, and angle B would be 95. So there's multiple ways of getting the 2 angles to be 180 or add up to 180. So that's why we could come up with a counterexample. Okay, here, this is a little bit tight here on the screen, so follow me. Find the truth value of P and Q, and that's in parentheses, grouped together, or R. So the 3 statements that you're going to look at here are P says -5 squared is greater than 0. Q is an isosceles trapezoid has 2 congruent sides. And R, 2 angles whose measure have a sum of 180 are complements. So first we need to figure out separately whether these are true or false. So if you think about the statement for P, -5 squared, that's going to be positive 25. That is always going to be greater than 0, and so we're going to say that that's true. Q, an isosceles trapezoid, has 2 congruent sides. Well, the definition of an isosceles figure means that it has 2 congruent sides, so that would also be true. R, 2 angles whose measure have a sum of 180 are complements. That is false, because 2 angles whose measure have a sum of 180 are supplements, not complements. So if we think about this separately, we have P and Q. So we would need to have both of those be either true or false, and then we need to think about whether R is true or false. So P was true, Q is also true. So we have true in the grouping. Then we think of true or, okay, which is this symbol here. Okay, that means or. So true or, and then R was false. If we have a 1 true and we have 1 false, but it's an or, that means the entire statement we could conclude is true. So we would say true. Now we have, suppose P and Q are both false when we have the same statements. So P and Q were originally true. We're assuming that they're false, even though we know that they're not false. But it's telling us that they need to be false. So what would be the truth value of P and not Q or not R? And I said false because if you think about P we're saying is false. Q we're saying is false, but it's saying not Q. So we have 1 false and we have 1 true in the grouping right here. Okay, so that would be true. I'm sorry, I messed that up. That would be false because you have one true and one false. So one false, when it's an and, you can't have that. So the whole statement is going to be false. So we have false coming out of the grouping symbols, or, and then the statement are was originally false, so now they're saying not are, which means true is going to be for are. So if we summarize this, we have in grouping symbols that was false, or the are was also false, so our entire thing has to be false. And remember that this little symbol here, the squiggly, means not something. It's negating the statement. Here we're asked to find the next term in the sequence. So if you want to, I always start with thinking about addition. So this is going to be plus 3, and then I'm going to see if there's a pattern. This is plus 5, okay, so this is plus 7, so you can see that there's a pattern, and it's being added by odd intervals. So the next number would be 26 plus 11, which would give me 37. Now we're asked to find the conclusion or identify the conclusion of the statement. So think about an if-then statement. If you have an if-then statement, the if part is the hypothesis and the then part is the conclusion. Here we have an if part, so we're assuming that the other part of the sentence is the then part. So the then part would be, in this case, either x equals 4 or x equals negative 4. So that's going to be considered our conclusion. Here we're asked to write the converse of the statement. The converse switches the hypothesis and the conclusion with each other. So if we have two angles are complementary and congruent, then they are 45 degrees. We're going to switch that to say if they are 40, or if two angles are 45 degrees, let me go back, I forgot that. Then they are complementary and congruent. So we're going to say then they are complementary and congruent. So all I actually did was flip the hypothesis with the conclusion. And that would be my statement. Next, we're thinking about the law of detachment. Okay, so that is going to tell us whether this is supposed to be valid or not valid. If you think about the given here, it says if you drive without a license, you will always get a ticket. Mary got a ticket. So, think about the scenarios of Mary getting a ticket. Is it always going to be because she didn't have a license, or is there other ways that she could possibly get a ticket? So the conclusion says Mary was driving without a license because of what our given was, but if you think about the law of detachment, there's other scenarios here that would work. So since there's other scenarios here that would work, this actually is going to be an invalid statement. Now we're going to determine which statement follows logically from the given statements, and this is more using the law of syllogism. So if a figure is a square, then it has 4 right angles. That's our first statement. Then if we have a figure has 4 right angles, then it is a rectangle. Think about the law of syllogism. What that says is we take out what I call the middle, okay, and we take our first if and our last then. So we have if a figure is a square, then it is a rectangle. And we can see from our 4 choices here, A, B, C, or D, C is going to have that as the answer. So that would be our answer. And that concludes our quiz review for lessons 2.1 through 2.5.